Today was a busy baking day as I restocked my kitchen with both my sourdough sandwich bread and sourdough artisan bread. I had some sourdough discard left over in my fridge from earlier this week, so of course I also had to make a batch of sourdough discard pancakes for our morning breakfast. I got creative with these pancakes this morning and came up with 3 delicious and fun variations that you can try yourself. Join me as I work in my kitchen if you want to learn how to make each of these recipes. So the first thing I did that morning was I fed my sourdough starter. I typically keep mine in the fridge and I'll take it out when I'm ready to bake. So I wanted to make 2 different leavens, one for the sourdough sandwich bread and one for the sourdough artisan bread. So I typically do a ratio of 50 grams of starter, 50 grams of bread flour, and 50 grams of water. And that's if I want my starter to be ready within 4 to 6 hours. If I want it to last a little bit longer, I might do a ratio of 10 grams of starter to 50 grams of water and 50 grams of bread flour. And I did 2 separate ones for this. You'll notice I'm not super exact with my measurements. Really, the most important thing is the texture that you're getting, so you don't want it to be too watery, too runny. You want it to be more like a thick paste by the time it's done. So I typically add a little bit more flour, like I may do 50 grams of water and 55 grams of flour. I just check what the consistency is like and I'll add more flour if I need to. Basically, you want it to look like this. If you flip this jar upside down, you don't want it to be able to come out right away. You want it to mostly stay in place, and that'll make for a really good starter. So you'll see I just did my first leaven and now I'm going to do my second one, and I'm going to let those rise for about 4 to 6 hours. Then they'll be either doubled or tripled in size and ready to use.
Okay, after we have started our leaven, these are going to rise for about 4 to 6 hours. Once they've doubled in size, then they're ready to use, and we'll come back and we'll make the sourdough bread. But in the meantime, I have my boys here with me. They wanted to help this morning, and we're going to be making our sourdough discard pancakes. So I have my discard. I never throw discard away. All you have to do is get a big jar, put it in the refrigerator, and basically it's good to go. And if you keep adding more discard to it regularly, that keeps it fresh. So you shouldn't really be getting any mold or anything with it. So I have just enough discard here to make some sourdough discard pancakes, and we're going to be doing that next.
I use the recipe from Lisa over at Farmhouse on Boone, so I will leave a link to that recipe in the description box. We began this recipe by adding 1/4 cup sourdough discard to a bowl, followed by 1½ cups of milk. Then we added 2 eggs, and I love this recipe because my boys can literally help with every step, and I especially love them helping crack the eggs into the bowl. They've gotten pretty good with cracking eggs. Next, add 1/4 cup melted butter, followed by 2 tablespoons of honey or maple syrup. I didn't have any honey, so I opted for maple syrup, which turned out really delicious. So I think I'll continue to use maple syrup in the future. Combine those wet ingredients together, and then we'll move on to the dry ingredients. In a separate bowl, combine 1 3/4 cup all-purpose flour, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and 1 teaspoon of baking soda. Combine the dry and the wet ingredients together and whisk until just combined. You don't want to overmix it, and it's okay if it's a little bit lumpy still. Because I wanted to do 3 different variations with this pancake batter, I separated it into 3 different bowls. Okay, the first variation that I did is chocolate banana, and for this one I just added about a tablespoon of cocoa powder and 1 mashed banana, and just add that to the batter, mix it up, and then it's ready to cook. The next variation I did was peanut butter and jelly, and oh my gosh, you guys, this was so delicious. So for this one, I just added about a tablespoon of strawberry jam. This is one that I made from scratch. If you want the recipe for it, I'll link the video in the description. You can use any sort of jelly or jam, and you can use any flavor, but for this one, I chose strawberry. And then I just mix that into the batter, and then I add the peanut butter at the end. For the final one, I decided to just keep the batter plain and just add some fresh blueberries to it while it's cooking. Next, heat your pan up. I went ahead and used a cast iron skillet for this one. Heat it up over a medium-high heat. I'm going to show you my little butter trick for our pancakes. Just take a stick of butter and you're just going to put a fork and stab it right in just like this. And then you can use the fork as a sort of handle and you can easily butter the pan, and then you can also use it later when you want to butter the pancakes. It's really handy, it's really easy, and it's just nice because then you don't have to use a spatula to move the butter around on the pan. You can just use the fork to do it. Okay, the skillet was nice and hot, so we're going to begin with the banana chocolate pancakes, and I just put 3 little ones on. I like to make smaller pancakes, it's just easier in my opinion, and I'm usually making them for my boys, and they eat smaller pancakes anyways, but you could easily make larger pancakes if you want to with this. Let it cook on the first side for about 3 to 5 minutes. You'll know it's done when you start to see it bubble, and then the bubbles will start popping, and that's how you know that the first side is done and it's ready to flip to the other side. Cook on the second side for a few minutes, I would say about 3 to 4 minutes, and then it is ready to be taken off the skillet and you can start your next batch. I like to wipe my pan in between just because the little bits of the pancake stay in there and then they start to burn, so this just helps keep the pancakes a little bit cleaner. So I like to wipe with a paper towel and then I'll rebutter it and then add my next batch of pancakes. So these are the peanut butter and jelly pancakes that I'm doing, and then after I do these, I'm going to do my batch of regular pancakes and add the fresh blueberries in, and then we will be done with the cooking and we'll move on to the toppings. Okay, for the chocolate banana pancakes, we're just going to top this with some whipped cream. I went ahead and whipped up some homemade whipped cream. It's so easy to make. But if you don't have that, you can use store-bought whipped cream. If you want to add butter, go ahead and do that first before you add the whipped cream, or you can leave it off. And then after that, you're going to top it with some maple syrup and finish it off with some fresh slices of banana and just a little bit of cocoa powder on top. You guys, these pancakes were so delicious. Okay, next up we had the peanut butter and jelly pancakes. So once again, you're going to top it with a little dollop of whipped cream. Homemade is best, but if you can't do homemade, store-bought is fine. And then after that, you're going to top it with some peanut butter. You can drizzle it on like this, or you can just plop it right on top, however you want to do it. But add the peanut butter on top, and then after that, you're going to add a dollop of fresh jam or jelly on top. And this is optional, but if you want to add some fresh fruit like fresh strawberries, or if you're using another kind or another flavor of jam, you can add those fresh berries on top. But I had never done this kind of pancake before, but wow, this was so delicious. Give this one a try for sure. Okay, the last one is just a nice classic blueberry pancake. So I added lots of butter to this, lots of maple syrup, and then just topped it with some fresh blueberries. You can use frozen for this. Actually, oftentimes I prefer frozen just because they blend into the pancake batter easier, but I didn't have any frozen this time, so I just did fresh. But either way, it's going to be delicious. These are nice, simple, and I love adding berries to pancakes. So there you have it, my 3 variations on these sourdough pancakes. Give them a try. Let me know what you think. So I came back later that day. I would say it was about 6 hours later, and my starter was definitely ready. It had actually started to fall just a little bit, but it was still okay to use. So I measured 100 grams of starter into the bowl to begin my sourdough sandwich bread, and I got this recipe from Lisa's farmhouse. I will leave a link to the recipe in the description box. Guys, this sandwich bread is so delicious, so amazing. I love this recipe. After you add the starter to the bowl, you're going to mix in 325 grams of room temperature water, 20 grams of extra virgin olive oil, and 40 grams of honey. Now, I was a little bit low on my honey. I didn't quite have enough, so I went ahead and mixed in just a little bit of granulated sugar. It's totally fine. I've made this with granulated sugar when I was out of honey. I prefer to use honey, but if you don't have honey, you can use sugar, and I would just use about the same amount. You can convert it to tablespoons. I think it's like 1 3/4 tablespoon, but go ahead and do that conversion, and you can totally add sugar if you don't have honey. Then you're going to add 10 grams of salt. Go ahead and move that to a mixer and put it in the stand mixer for about 3 to 5 minutes. Let it mix thoroughly. If you don't have a stand mixer, you can totally mix it by hand. I just prefer to use the stand mixer so I can be doing other stuff while it's mixing. While that was mixing, I went ahead and fed my sourdough. I had forgotten to leave a little bit earlier and do this, so I went ahead and did it now. I wanted to show this because I wanted to show you guys the consistency. I've learned a lot about consistency with sourdough starter, mostly from Turner Farm on YouTube. I will link a video in the description. I've learned so much from her about getting the right consistency with my sourdough starter, that it really shouldn't be runny, but it should be more like a thick dough. If you were to flip the cup upside down, it shouldn't run out, and in doing so, it'll get you a nice, strong, solid starter. So definitely watch her videos. She's got a lot of great videos about sourdough. Okay, bring back the wet ingredients from the stand mixer, and you're going to add 500 grams of all-purpose flour. You can use bread flour as well if you want to, but I found that all-purpose works just fine. I like to start my mixing with a dough whisk just because it's a little less messy, but then I always move to my hands and mix by hand. This dough is pretty sticky. I'm just going to warn you, your hand's going to get full of dough. But what I do after I've thoroughly mixed it is I just take off as much of the dough as I can from my fingers, and then I just wipe the rest away with a paper towel and wash my hands afterwards. Cover the bowl with some clear plastic wrap or a towel, and you're going to let that sit for 30 minutes, and then you're going to do 3 sets of stretch and folds spaced 30 minutes apart. So 30 minutes later, come back, your dough should look like this. You're going to perform your first set of stretch and folds. Just stretch it up, fold it over, do that 4 more times on each corner, and then I do 1 final stretch and fold at the very end. Then you're going to let that dough sit for 30 minutes, come back and do it the second time, let it sit for 30 minutes, come back and do it the third time. Cover it with the plastic wrap or towel, and then you're going to let it sit on your countertop in a nice warm space for about 3 to 4 hours. It kind of depends on how hot your house is, what the temperature is like, but it should basically be doubled in size, and that's how you know that it's ready. When it's ready, go ahead and take some flour, sprinkle it onto a clean countertop, and we are going to laminate this dough. To laminate it, just take it out of the bowl. I like to use a scraper because this dough is very sticky, and then I like to sprinkle it with a little bit of flour on top. It just makes it easier to work with because it is so sticky, and you're going to work it out into the shape of a rectangle. So just be careful to not break the dough, but you do want to stretch it as far as you can, get it thinned out into the shape of a rectangle, and then as it thins out, you're going to begin to see these little bubbles form, and you want to pop as many of those bubbles as you can. The reason being is the more that those bubbles stay in place, the more holes you're going to have in your bread when it's done. And for sandwich bread especially, I don't like to have a lot of holes in my bread. I like it to be pretty dense. So I like to go through with my fingertips and pop as many of these bubbles as I can, shake the bread out or the dough out like this, just to make sure it's really nicely laminated. And I did notice a difference. The first couple times I made it, I had some larger holes, and when I really took the time to laminate it, to pop all of those bubbles, I noticed my bread was much more dense and didn't have those holes, much easier to use for sandwiches. Then take your scraper and use it to fold one side of the rectangle over like this, and then you're going to fold it over on the other side. And finish by rolling it from one side to the other. If you see any little bubbles form as you're doing this, you can pop those little bubbles. Fold the dough down on the sides and pinch it together just to try to bring as much consistency as possible. And then you're going to take some parchment paper, place the dough on top of the parchment paper, and place it inside of a baking pan. Cover that pan with either a towel, a plastic bag, or you could use a cover like this that is specific for sourdough bread. And you can let it sit for an hour on the countertop, or you can do like what I did and you can place it in the fridge overnight if you want to bake the next day. When you are ready to bake your bread, go ahead and preheat the oven to 375 degrees. When the oven is preheated, go ahead and take that bread out of the fridge or out off the countertop, and you're just going to place that entire pan into the oven, and you're going to bake it for about 35 to 40 minutes. You can look and see if the top of the crust is nice and browned, and that should tell you whether or not it's ready. Okay, now the best part, you're going to top this bread with some butter. You can use room temperature butter, or honestly, you can just take a stick out of the refrigerator and use that stick. The bread is hot, so the butter's gonna melt nicely no matter what. So top it thoroughly with some butter, and then you wanna let it cool on the countertop for at least an hour, preferably a couple hours, so that it's easier to cut and it's so delicious. You can eat this bread just with butter, plain, or you can use it for sandwiches. I love to make my boys peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, or my husband ham and cheese sandwiches. But this bread is delicious, it's amazing, and we no longer buy bread from the store because I make this bread and have it ready to go every day in our household. Okay, next on the list is the sourdough artisan bread. So I have my other leaven here, and I just wanted to show you, look at how stretchy that is. Such a strong starter right there, and so you want to look for that to know that your starter is ready to go. So we're going to begin by measuring out 100 grams of starter into a bowl, followed by 360 grams of room temperature water. Then add 12 grams of table salt, and then you're going to mix all of that together with a dough whisk. And then after that, you're going to add 500 grams of bread flour. I do like to use bread flour instead of all-purpose flour for the artisan loaf, just because I want to make sure that I get a nice rise out of this loaf, and so I prefer to stick with the bread flour. But if you want to try all-purpose flour, I'm sure it would work out just fine. Mix all that together with a dough whisk, and then you can move to using your hand to finish the mixing. This recipe that I use, it's actually my own recipe. I've kind of experimented with some different proportions, and I like the way this turned out. It's a slightly higher hydration, so the dough does start out pretty sticky, but by the end of the stretch and folds, it should be a nice consistency. But you're probably going to need to also do the same thing with this one as I did with the sandwich bread, which is where you just get all the dough off your fingertips and then use a paper towel to get the rest of it off and wash your hands afterwards. Cover the dough with a towel or some plastic wrap, and you're going to let it sit for 30 minutes, and then you're going to come back and perform the first set of stretch and folds. You're going to do the same thing as I did with the sandwich bread. You're going to stretch and fold 4 times. So just stretch it up, fold it over. You're going to do that 4 times and finish with a nice long stretch of the dough at the end. I like to kind of form the dough into a ball shape when I'm done. And then cover it, let it sit for 30 minutes, and you're going to do that a total of 3 times. Cover it after you've performed that last set of stretch and folds, and you're going to let it sit on your countertop in a nice warm space until it has just almost doubled in size. It should take anywhere from 6 to 12 hours, really depending on the temperature of your home and the strength of your starter. Once the dough is ready, go ahead and flour a clean countertop, and once again we are going to laminate this dough. Use a scraper to scrape it out of the bowl onto the countertop, and then we are going to stretch it out into a rectangular shape. Go ahead and sprinkle some flour on top just to make it a little easier to work with the dough. And for this one, unlike the sandwich bread, I'm not as worried about popping any bubbles. If there's any really large bubbles, I might pop them, but otherwise I just want to stretch it out into a nice rectangular shape, shake it out like this onto the countertop, and then for this one I'm going to fold all the corners in to make more of a round shape. After I fold all the corners in, I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to work that into a nice round shape using my hands and a circular motion, bringing it towards me to help build tension in the dough. Then I'm going to take a banneton basket and line it with a tea towel and sprinkle that with some flour so that the dough doesn't stick to the towel. Then I'm going to take my scraper and flip that dough upside down, place it inside of the banneton basket, and I'm going to pinch the edges together just to try to continue building tension and bring that dough together more. I like to sprinkle the top with some more flour so that the tea towel doesn't stick to it, and then I just fold the towel over. I only use the towel to cover this because I found that it covers it well enough. It doesn't get dried out with this tea towel covering it. So I cover it with the tea towel, and then I like to place it in the refrigerator for at least a few hours, typically overnight if I'm doing it the day before, and then I'll bake it in the morning. So I place it in the refrigerator overnight, and then we'll come back in the morning to bake it. Okay, when you are ready to bake your bread, preheat your oven to 500 degrees, and then you're going to place a Dutch oven inside of the oven as it's preheating. Once the oven has preheated, take your bread out of the refrigerator, unwrap it, and you're going to flip it over onto a piece of parchment paper. Use either a scoring device or you could just use a knife if you don't have one of these. I am by no means a pro at scoring. I'm still learning how to do really cool designs, so mine are pretty basic and sometimes crooked. They don't come out right, but do the best that you can. The most important thing is that you're doing some sort of scoring just to help the rise of the bread and to help it cook on the inside better. Take your hot Dutch oven out of the oven, place the bread inside, put it back into the oven, and you're going to bake it with the lid on for 30 minutes at 500 degrees. I also want to share with you my trick for not getting burnt crust at the bottom of your bread. Take a baking sheet, fill it with water, and place it on a rack below the Dutch oven. I've done this and I always come out with beautiful bread that's not burnt on the bottom. After 30 minutes, lower your temperature in the oven to 450 degrees, take the lid off, and you're going to bake this anywhere from 3 to 10 minutes just to get a nice golden crust. So really be looking at it to make sure that you don't burn it, but anywhere from 3 to 10 minutes until it's the color that you desire it to be. Then you're going to take it out of the oven. Go ahead and use a spatula to take that bread out of the Dutch oven and place it onto a hot pad or onto a cooling rack. And then you're going to let that bread cool, and when it's completely cool, you can come back and cut into it. And there you have it, my own recipe for artisan sourdough bread. I love the way this bread comes out. One of my favorite ways to eat it is just toasted with butter. Sometimes I like to put jam on it, or this time I did some freshly chopped herbs from my garden. and it's the most delicious thing to eat. So I hope you guys enjoyed these recipes. I hope that you'll try them yourself, and if you like them, if you have any tips for me, if you did anything differently, definitely leave a comment in the comments and let me know. Thank you for watching this, and good luck. Enjoy your sourdough baking journey.